Hello, in this video we're going to talk about how you actually use augmented six chords in context when you are voice leading them. In the last video we defined what they are and we looked at the three geographic names and the differences and similarities between them. Make sure you understand that information. Assuming you're clear on that, then we're ready to get into voice leading these chords. So let's look at what that means. First of all, when you're voice leading an augmented six chord, I'm using the A6 generically. It could be Italian, German or French, it doesn't matter. So any of the augmented six chords, they tend to resolve to either a 5 chord or to a 1-6-4 chord. That is ultimately their goal, to get you to the 5 chord or to the 1-6-4 chord. And obviously once they get to the 1-6-4 chord, that usually then logically goes on to a 5 chord and a 1 chord. So it's kind of always leading you onto the 5 chord or a 5 chord functioning chord, like the 1-6-4 chord. So the augmented six chords are going to try and get you to the dominant chord. How are they going to do that? The primary thing to remember about the augmented six is that the augmented six interval, let's say if we were in C major or C minor, we would have this interval. That interval wants to move out to the dominant note. Right? So that is the primary voice leading entity that you need to keep in mind. That wherever you decide in the 4 parts to put the augmented six interval, it wants to move out. Now because it wants to move out, because it's got a strong desire to move to the dominant note, and this dominant note of course is in both the 1-6-4 and the 5 chord, so it works for both chords. Because it wants to move out in that way, you don't want to double either of these notes, because if you double them, the doubled note's going to want to move out, and you're going to end up with octaves. So don't double the 2 active notes in this chord, the notes that want to move. Double something else. Now, in the case of the French and the German, you've got 4 notes anyway, so you don't need to worry about doubling. In the Italian, you're going to want to double the tonic. The tonic is the only note that isn't active, isn't having to go somewhere, and so you want to make sure you double that note, which makes sense. It's the tonic of the chord anyway. If I said to you, here are 3 notes, which of them makes most sense to double, regardless of where they were going to go voice leading, you would say, well, I'm probably going to double the tonic because it's the most stable note. So just following good doubling guidelines, you would probably draw the same conclusion. But there's an added reason to do so in this case, because the augmented six interval is going to move. So if you're resolving this, the first thing that you do, it doesn't matter if you're going to 1-6-4 or 5, the augmented six interval is going to move out to the dominant note in both directions. See that? So as the F sharp moves up and the A flat moves down in this case, that gives you a good solid doubling of the dominant note. Now everything else just moves to the most logical voice leading place. If we want to go to a 5 chord, this would move down to a B, this would move up to a D. Or this would move down to a B and this would move up to a D. It wouldn't matter. They would just move to the most logical place. And this would be Italian 6 going to 5. If instead you wanted a voice lead it going to 1-6-4, then these notes would change, these 2 notes would change, so that this would become a 1-6-4 chord. This would probably remain on the C, creating the tonic again, creating a nice smooth voice leading. And this might then leap up to the E, for example. Someone's going to have to get to the E sooner or later, one way or another. Or this would go up to the E, this would remain on the C. Either way, you move by the smoothest possible voicing, following the voice leading guidelines, to either 5 or 1-6-4. With the French 6, let's move this one to 1-6-4, just so we can see. Again, the augmented 6 moves out. We go to G, we go up here to G. We're in C minor as it happens, but we could equally be in C major. It wouldn't matter either way for most of these examples. And so then if we're going to go to a 1-6-4 chord, in fact if we are in minor, I should point out that would be a 1-6-4. Try and be as accurate as we can. That would be a minor 1-6-4. And so as we're going to move out here to the dominant, now we want to find the other notes of the 1-6-4 chord, which is C, E, G. So C and E. The C would probably remain the same. That's good voice leading. And the D would go up to the E flat that's good voice leading too. And we end up with a 1-6-4 chord, and it would then go on in the progression to wherever else it might be going to go, probably the 5 chord. Let's look at the German 6 here. This is an interesting one, because if we take the German augmented 6 and we decide to go to a 5 chord, the logical thing to do is move, again, we move the augmented 6 down and up to create the dominant note, to get to the dominant note. And then if we're moving to a 5 chord, we will move everything else according to good voice leading principles. So this would probably go down to a B, natural of course, in the key, and this would go down to a D. Now, the more astute of you may immediately say, whoa, hang on a minute, look, you just wrote parallel fifths. This is the one time that parallel fifths are okay. When you are moving a German 6, German augmented 6, to a 5 chord, and you kind of have to do this. Now, this is probably why often the German augmented 6 would move to a 1-6-4 chord, or it would move to a 5-7 chord where you could then have the F natural in, and that would be natural in the key signature anyway, but F natural, and then you don't have the fifths, if you see what I mean, because you've changed things a little bit. But it is the one time when it's actually okay to have parallel fifths. You kind of get away with it because it has been done in the past enough. When it comes to this unique circumstance of using a German augmented 6 chord and going to a 5 chord, all right? But that's a little bit kind of advanced, a little bit beyond what we necessarily need to worry about. The principle here, the thing to remember is when you are voice leading an augmented 6 chord, the augmented 6 interval, wherever you choose to put it, you'll notice that it's in different places in here. It doesn't have to be in the same, adjacent voice parts. It can be spread out. But wherever the augmented 6 interval is, that goes out to the tonic. It goes a half step down and a half step up to the tonic. And then the other notes, you move by the most logical voice leading guidelines. If you do those two things, then you can't go far wrong in voice leading this chord. Worth keeping in the back of your mind that it generally goes to 5 or to 1-6-4, but if you do good voice leading, you're probably going to end up in one of those two places anyway. That's how you voice lead your augmented 6 chords. In the third video on augmented 6, we cover one, not exception, it's still good smooth voice leading, one situation where there's a slight adjustment in the way you write the augmented 6 chord, and we'll get to that in the next video. Thanks.